session. The session is on digital library technologies theme. And in the first session, we are happy to host technology leaders and experts who have been instrumental in crafting technical architectures of different digital libraries. So we shall listen to their experiences about digital library technical architecture design. And to chair this session, I like to invite Mr. Pralay Patita and take the proceeding forward. Pralay Patita received Masters of Technology in Computer Science from Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, and has more than 14 years of industry experience. He is the co-founder and principal engineer of Veer Softech Private Limited. He heads the document management system and web technology group at Veer Softech, which is a registered service provider of DSpace in India. Under his leadership, Veer Softech has implemented DSpace-based digital repositories for various renowned libraries and government organizations in India. He also leads the web technology group at Veer Softech, which works on latest web technology frameworks such as Sencha, among others. Prior to this, he was a senior computer scientist at Adobe India, where he had worked extensively on PDF and imaging technologies, web content management, etc. So I'd like to invite Mr. Pralay Patita.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to welcome you in this session themed digital library technologies. Libraries, as they say, stores the energy that fuels the imagination. With that note, let's begin this session. We have a panel of distinguished speakers from across the globe to talk about it. These stalwarts will give you a 360 view of the world of digital libraries. Our first speaker of this session is Professor Partha Pratim Das. Professor Das is a joint principal investigator of National Digital Library of India project of MHRD, Government of India. He is a professor at the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, IIT Kharagpur, and heads the Rajendra Mishra School of Engineering Entrepreneurship. His current interests include human-computer interaction, computer analysis of Indian classical dance, technology-enabled education, and software engineering. Professor Das has received several recognitions, including UNESCO Young Scientist Award, INSA Young Scientist Award, UGC Young Teachers Career Award, INAE Young Engineer Award, Intra Special Recognition Award, and many more. Professor Das will highlight us about the digital initiatives and NDL of India. His talk will delve into some of the digital initiatives in the field of education and the role that NDLI is poised to take as a knowledge container in this field. Welcome, Professor Das.
Hello, am I audible? Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for the kind introduction. And I have been talking about this National Digital Library and the associated digital initiatives for last 3 years probably. I've talked 40, 50 times. But today I'm really nervous because this is the first time I'm talking in front of such a learned audience. So please forgive me if there are mistakes. To get started, I wanted to focus on two parts. One is digital initiatives. And in the welcome ceremony itself, Professor Chakravarti and Professor Kanjilal have well specified that any digital library is primarily based on certain philosophy. So it's beyond, we all know, the time when libraries used to be repositories. So now libraries have their visions of own. So if we talk about European when we are significantly talking about cultural aspects. We are talking about open access and so on. Similarly, National Digital Library of India also has a very strong philosophy and a very strong focus that Professor Chakrabarty was mentioning about. And I'll start with a little bit of that introduction before I actually get into the architectural part. So Professor Chakrabarty mentioned this, we are soon moving fast to become a very young country. We are a large country and we are going to become a very young country with, by 2030, our dependency ratio is expected to be just over 0.4, which is quite enviable. But that raises the question, and the core philosophy behind all these that we are trying to do is how to leverage this demographic dividend. How to young this large population of young people, how to get them rightly skilled and so on. So if we look into the overall challenges of education in India, we are not only widely spread and having a large population, naturally we have a huge number of students. We have large number of institutions at multiple levels. We are a nation who speaks over 20 languages. Our official number is 22 official languages that education is provided in. We have severe lack of teachers and so on. So in view of this, all these challenges, naturally, digital technology, particularly the advances in artificial intelligence, machine learning, is a kind of panacea that was identified long back, and technology-enabled learning was identified as a primary enabler in this respect. So if we turn back into history, I could, at least as a young kid, I could recollect that we had the first attempts possibly in 1980s where there used to be UGC classrooms in our national TV. So it's actually, the initiative started that long ago. It was a special university called Jamia Millia University. I still remember many of those sessions at that time. Moving into the 90s, several institutions started experimenting with different forms of distance mode learning. They were not online necessarily, they were often recorded and then locally played back, supported by the TAs and so on. And certainly, as Professor Kanjilal mentioned, from this millennium, the things started getting bigger momentum, very successful NPTEL program, wherein an expert teacher records videos on his course and uploads them, and with the support of the government and some industry partners, these are freely available for self-learning to the students. And with all this, the National Mission on Education through ICT was launched in 2009, primarily to bolster several projects taken up to enable digital technology into education, to make advantage of that. In 2014, NPTEL NOC, that is, the online courses started. The earlier ones were just self-study. These are online courses which are actually executed over a specified period, and you can complete and get certificates based on those. So in this, naturally, while we had a big traditional system starting from our Gurukul system into powered by the British education system, which came onto India for a large range of time, and the other side of the new age digital techniques, the new solutions and their associated problems, kind of the education system is at a crossroad as to how do you mix these two, how do you choose one from the other. So quite a lot of brainstorming started in this decade around 2010 as to which way to go, and part of it culminated in a summit which FICCI organized with MHRD. And they took a view that if you fast forward to 2030 and try to look back and vision that in 2030 the demographic dividend has happened and the respective citizens are all empowered, they're educated, they're skilled, then in the previous 20 years, from 2010 to 2030, what you should have done. Naturally, there were many new national missions, programs, reforms, central state government level, private sector interventions, but that they are just not adequate enough. In fact, certain calculations were carried out to show that if this has to be achieved in 2030, then in the previous 20 years, India should have built 6 universities and 270 colleges every month of those 20 years, which clearly shows that it's an impossible target. So India chose to go the MOOCs way. So that's kind of the little short history of our India's commitment towards using digital technology in education, which is our strong philosophy behind these initiatives that are being done. So in the recent time, particularly 2017 in particular, many of the programs have been launched, 17, 16. The Strengthen, there's a Swayam, which is primarily being called as India's MOOCs, where you can actually take courses and get certificate. There's Swayam Prabha, these are DTI channels, which are online classrooms that you can attend over your TV. There's a very unique initiative of Gyan, in which international faculty collaborate with national faculty, provide guest lectures. Those are locally attended by students. They are recorded, distributed, they are online transmitted. All different forms of technology is used, and we are making sure that we have a really high quality educational system through this. And to support all this, there's an national academic depository, so which basically puts all your academic records. So if we put this all together, then you see that we have Swayam Prabha, Gyan. These are just representative. There are several such programs which take education through self-actualization over internet or over TV. There's a credit transfer certification system which allows up to 20 credits to be taken in a regular university through MOOCs. We are working through all those. But given all that, these are all island of solutions. Digital technologies, island of solutions. There needs to be a container. There needs to be somewhere, finally, all the knowledge that are, all the information, all the knowledge that are required in these programs, that are linked through these programs, what the student needs to develop through, needs to be put in, and that gives rise to the conceptualization of National Digital Library of India, which is conceived as a knowledge repository available over internet and over mobile connections. So that's kind of the conceptual, development, conceptual approach of digital initiatives that naturally culminates into the National Digital Library of India, which was launched as a pilot in April 2015, and that ran up to the last month. It actually closed on 30th September, and we are now into phase 2. That's we are making it full scale and so on, and that's where it's very appropriate that we are holding this workshop here so that we can learn better about the current technologies and move forward. In particular, NDLI's vision is to build up a national knowledge asset which could be the driving force. I think after Professor Chakraborty, nothing needs to be added in terms of the vision. The specific mission is to build an ubiquitous, integrated NDL as a knowledge source. And we drive ourselves with two basic words on which we take all decisions. We say that NDLI is inclusive and is open. So it's inclusive in terms of whether you say for which level of education we are talking of in this library, every level, which segment of people we are talking of, all kinds of students, all kinds of learners, what languages we are talking of, because in India language is a big factor because there are so many of them. We are talking about all languages, all types of discipline, everything. We are inclusive in terms of our motto in everything, and we are open in every respect in principle. And that's not only limited to being open in terms of content access. We are open in terms of access to our infrastructure, access to the development that we are making, and we intend to share that with other partners. So with this, when we originally drove this whole design, certainly we talked about what are the challenges that exist, but we looked at the beginning that there are several wealth of content that are also available, which has happened through all of these different ministerial programs, different private initiatives, institutional initiatives, and so on. And still, we had a lot of gap. The primary gap was there's no single window search. If you have to, if a student has to. So this is particularly thinking from the perspective of the user. If the student has to find out information about what she needs in terms of the education, then she first primarily has to know what is the portal that she should be looking for. Is it the NPTEL portal? Is it the Krishi Kosh portal? It is the NCERT portal? And only then it is possible to search through those information. Google search often is too powerful, too generic to help a acquiring student, because it just goes by the keywords. So just to share an example, there's an 8th standard student who looks for magnetism on Google and gets 1,000,000 pages. A doctoral student looks for magnetism, gets 1,000,000 pages. But the expectations between these two students, naturally, as you all understand, are very different. The school student is looking for possibly NCERT, which is our central board, NCERT books, question papers, tutorials, where the doctoral student is looking for different publications and so on. So there is a major need to put the search specifically on the knowledge graph, specifically in terms of the metadata as we identified. And there are several other associated issues there in terms of varied technology of digital library, in terms of lack of interactability, improper user interface, and so on which we primarily designed I would say, the notional service architecture, which at the core has a digital repository providing authoring and acquisition services, the services for content creation and borrowing. Naturally, on top of that, the core library service, that of dissemination, which is in terms of search and access, which is what you'll get to see if you get to the portal. And then we perceive that there has to be a whole lot of learning and other services. So with education in major focus, we have a major focus in terms of particularly working on different kinds of learning contents. It's just not books or articles. We're talking about varieties of video contents, lecture materials, indexed materials, and so on. I'm sure many of the leading libraries here have a lot of experience in handling all of that. Then look at experience-based learning. So based on the user's background, you provide content accordingly. I mean, same magnetism brings different content to 8th standard student and to a doctoral student. Localization services, multifaceting of interfaces, multilinguality. So you provide interface in multiple languages. Subsequently, you provide search in multiple languages. So these are, and while we worked through all of that, certainly the question was, is it enough? Is it what our National Digital Library of India should be satisfied with? We didn't know, because it's just a group of people doing the design. So we did a meta design of doing a set of open services. So whatever you do in this repository in terms of any of these services are also abstracted out in terms of a set of REST APIs. So that through these RESTful APIs, you can actually allow third parties to develop independent applications. And just to demonstrate that, our own mobile apps that run on Android as well as iOS are actually implemented through these APIs. So Android iOS groups did not know about the internals. It's an independent group. We just use those APIs. So we demonstrate that this is an example of what you can do. So we are looking through different partners for doing that. So that's a more or less, at a very top level, this is the service architecture with which this library is built. So in terms of the presentation, this is primarily not a new library. So we are more an integrator, more collecting and ingesting metadata only. We are not taking content and putting it together. It's not meant to be a big repository in that sense, but it just collects and ingests the metadata. And wherever someone has found the required content, the full text is presented from the source, from the source's view. So if the content is coming from, say, IIT Bombay, then actually IIT Bombay's page is launched within NDL's page, and it will show that you're getting this from IIT Bombay. And that also helps us address some of the other technical issues about which we intend to have further discussions in this conference. So at core, it provides the two primary services of searching and browsing on which everything else is built up. A little bit on the objective and scope, and I put what Indian librarians start their learning with. These are called S.R. Ranganathan laws. Professor Ranganathan is about 100 years back, wrote down 5 laws, and it's very interesting. This was about 100 years old, and it's very widely taught in Indian library sciences. These laws, if you read them, they are as relevant with all the advances that we have made. The laws are still very relevant, so they are quite inspiring for us. And on this is what we build up. I'll skip on these details. This I have already said, this is the primary objective to create a 24/7 enabled infrastructure, which means we have a web portal and we have mobile services. We harvest from different repositories across institutions, and we provide immersive e-learning at all academic levels, all disciplines, and all languages, trying to be inclusive in all possible ways. And specifically, we have focus on, and these are the 2 areas where we also intend to learn from the experts here, is in terms of handling multiple different languages, both in terms of content creation, that's OCR technologies, interface technologies, search technologies in multiple different Indian languages specifically, and for the differently abled. India unfortunately has a large population of visually impaired people. So we have certain thoughts in terms of that. We'll have a lecture on this as well. So in terms of the content, NDL carries primarily 3 categories of content. Content, those are born digital, just a Word document that's created, that's born digital. Or they are digital surrogates of physical content, scanned documents, regenerated documents in digital form. And even certain, metadata only physical objects, like items that do not even have a complete digital existence, like say the god Jagannath in a famous Puri temple, who cannot even be imaged because of certain restrictions. But the metadata of Lord Jagannath would be there in the library. So these are typically the kind of contents that we deal with, and with a primary focus of being in the education space. Otherwise, the main focus, which I think, as we have been interacting with several other libraries, is kind of unique in terms of requirement in NDL, and that puts a lot of technical challenges, is the range of contents that we intend to keep, and that's what we have started on. So contents that are generated in different institutions, schools, higher education institutions, boards, and so on. The content generated in different research labs, organizations, professional institutions, central state universities, ministries, and so on. And nowadays, what is becoming very typical is the library should also have the data sets, should have maps, should have annotated spatial information, software, all of these. So the range is very wide. So there's a much bigger challenge in terms of how you standardize your metadata, how you organize that, how you profile that, how you extract that, and so on. In terms of presentation, we currently support this, that there's a content baseline which has, let's say, all the metadata together, and there's a generic interface through which one can search and find out information. And what architecturally we are working on is to have abstracted verticals, that working on a vertical on school. So that's if you switch to that vertical mode, whether that switching is explicit or automatic is a different question. If you switch to that, your interface changes, your search priorities change, your learning process changes, so that it's amenable to the user group who are in school education. Or it could be different domains. If you talk about a medical domain, then the kind of metadata and interfaces you need is very different. So based on this core digital library, we have the vision of, we are working on all this, a number of these vertical specific structures, and we would like to learn more about similar contents elsewhere. A wide range of stakeholders, expectedly starting from government to institutions to public, the industry, publishers. And this whole project it needs a registration, but that registration is free for all. It needs a registration so that users can be tracked, but anybody can come and register with an email address. So I'll just quickly run through a couple of snapshots of the portal, just to illustrate the kind of differences we are trying to create. These are not very clear, I'm sorry. So if you log in, these are the two primary functions, browse and search. So I'm searching here with magnetism, and this is the results I get. And on the left are a number of different refinements. So I mean, almost all the digital libraries today have variants of similar concept. And for us, as I said, the philosophical driving force is making education easy to reach. So it's more focused in terms of that. So you have the author filters, subject category filters, educational level, even difficulty level, and so on, and different types of content filters on, on this side. So while magnetism still brings a large number of contents, if you expand on the author and you can see who are the authors of this, you can choose particularly set a whole lot of combination of sub-filters and get very focused results. And with appropriate use of user experience tracking, AI and ML, what we intend to do is not all of these need to be done explicitly by the user on the interface. Many of them could be learned based on users' own behavior. So this gives you the basic, technological backbone on which you could create very effective filters. But the other side is these mean all of these are supported by the rich metadata that need to be there. I mean, you do not have the metadata, none of this is going to be useful. But that's the basic philosophy on which NDLI is primarily architected. So once this has been finally decided, then you click a link for the full text, and as I said, the full text comes from the source. So we actually show what is the source, what is the name of the source, and so on. And herein, in this structure, we will see that there are several issues that we intend to discuss about, which are not technical in the computer science sense or information science sense, but they're technical in terms of the legal sense, as to who has the rights of doing this, what are the licensing consequences, and is it enough that I show the content is coming from IIT Delhi's DSpace? Is it enough that if this content is not appropriate, if this infringes some copyright, is the digital library liable for that, and so on and so forth. So there are several such technical issues, and we will have a specific lecture around this area from an expert in this workshop itself. These are the details that you can see, the actual metadata. This is more meant for this kind of debugging the search, so that you can actually see what did you get and why you didn't get something and so on. This actual content. There are other different refinements, like you could refine it by educational level. Say I'm looking for only +2 level of contents and choose that, or automatically select that. So I'll skip through some of these. I'll take you straight to the other features. We provide a number of 4 different ways to browse. You can browse by the type of the content, whether it's a video or it's an image and so on. You can browse by the subject, which again is a matter of looks simple on the user interface, but it's a matter of deep research and a lot of open problems which we intend to get help from you all as to what is the subject classification. Internationally, as you all know, there are multiple classifications. They don't map between themselves. You do, we follow the DDC. That doesn't map easily to LCSH. None of them are complete in terms of what you want to do and so on. So these are areas to look for further issues. You can also browse by source who is providing the content. Since we are integrating from multiple sources, you can browse by the learning resource type and so on. It's available on, currently, other than English, it is available in Hindi and Bengali. Maybe in another 2-3 months, it will be available in another 7-8 Indian languages, just the interface part of it. And we are on Android as well as iOS. So that's a basic overview of what, quickly where NDL currently is. I just wanted to touch, I know, while we were doing it, we didn't know enough about the digital libraries across the world. And Professor Kanjilal has rightly mentioned that she and her team carried out a real comparative with several other libraries, which has helped us get direction of what we are repeating, which is possibly available elsewhere, and we are just repeating, re-exploring them, or what are really genuinely open problems, genuinely available problems. So that's the kind of genesis as to why we wanted to have this workshop and have you all here to discuss. I'll quickly go over how NDL in its architecture handles copyright and licensing. This is where with the international participants there may be different kinds of disconnect because copyright laws are different significantly between countries and other countries, and India has a cannot boast of a very well defined copyright law, particularly in the digital domain. So even the amendment 2012 is not a very clear copyright statement. It's not clear, at least I have talked to many experts, at least in India. It's not clear as to whether metadata has a copyright or it does not. I talked to Jill while I was in Right Statement Steering Committee meeting. Jill said yes, metadata does not have a copyright, but yes, in somewhere in France, possibly Paris, there was a one-day's strike because it was said that metadata does not have a copyright. So all those who created metadata said, then what are we doing? So there are open questions that I'm trying to highlight. As a community, we need to, it will be good if we can address that, if we can get pointers to that. So NDL as such tries to kind of half protect itself by just keeping the metadata and assuming that the metadata does not have a copyright and saying that if as a source you are providing it, then the copyright and the related responsibilities lie with you. So if you search in NDL, you'll find that by the side of the content you find certain symbols, which this open green open lock is the truly open access kind of content, which is where full text is available to anyone from anywhere kind of. So it's difficult to compute the exact statistics, but rough estimates as we met says that about 60% of what we currently carry falls in this category of which is open, truly open access. But there are several others where in some cases the provider of the content does not want to charge the user, but would like to put it behind a wall of login at that institutional end. So it's you have to get an authorization for getting that content. There are others which are subscribed, they come from publishers. So naturally you have to, either you or your institution has to have a subscription for that. And in this context, what we are trying to do specifically in terms of creating what we call is a national license of India. So the idea is like this, that we negotiate with the publisher and say that this bunch of contents will be freely available to anyone who accesses that content through the National Digital Library of India access. So say World eBook Library, it's a rich collection of copyright over books, well curated. So we have a national license on that, which means that if you try to access World eBook from anywhere, you have to pay for the content, the full text. But if you are a member of NDLI and you are logged in and you try to find that same content from the World eBook Library, you will get that free. So for that, there are different, again, a lot of technology involved. There are issues of how we will reliably identify that someone is logged in from NDLI. How do you reliably say that the person logged in NDLI is actually from India? So because geographic IPs, then the question is, if it's a national license, is it within India or is it for the Indians? So there are two different things. So someone who, I'm here, I was at the Netherlands. So can I, at Netherlands, what is my status? Can I access this from that? So these kind of issues, so there are a whole lot of technology questions involved there, which we would like to discuss on that. This is the eShodh Sindhu is a body of librarians and professionals. Incidentally, Professor Chakraborty also chairs this committee, who looks after our national licensing. Before I close, I'm told I just have 2 minutes, so I'll just quickly, give a glimpse of, trying to do all this. We have come across a lot of problems. There are a lot more problems that we have on our list than the problems that we could solve. And certainly, starting problem, and part of it, Professor Kanjilal mentioned, was with the metadata standard, because there are too many of them. So the question always is, which one do you use? Where do you catch the elephant? By the trunk or by the tail? And these are some of the basic challenges for us as we recognize is wide category, openness, enormous scale. These are some of the basic challenges. And what we have created and Professor Kanjilal and others have primarily helped us doing this is create an open virtual standard where we say that we do not define any new metadata, but we borrow from an existing standard, but borrow a part of it that's relevant for us. So whatever we borrow has been standardized, has been known already. So it's expected to be pretty clean. And we make that into a separate profile, like our generic metadata is adopted from Dublin Core. Our educational metadata like learning time, pedagogic objective and so on is borrowed from LRMI and so on. And then we put them into the same single namespace and try to make that search work together. So that in this way it becomes adjustable, that more and more different diversities we have, we can add more and more profiles and make our metadata contemporary in that respect. But this is one area I'm sure where there is a lot that's happening, there's a lot that needs to be solved, and there's a lot of problems that we would like to collaborate on. This is just the envelope. Certainly the associated question is, it's nice to say that we have a standard, but how do you get that? So creation, if we conceive that it will be manually created, it will never get done. If it is automated, then not all kinds of metadata can be easily automated. So there's a whole lot of opportunities for AI to do. You can very easily extract title, author, and this kind of. You can do quite a bit of good job in terms of subject classification. Look into different, TOC index and all that. You can make good machine learning model to get subject. But if you have to say what is the learning time, what is the time that it will take a student of an appropriate level to learn this, still AI probably does not have enough mechanisms to solve for that. So there are a whole lot of challenges in this. The translation of standards, the curation processes, finally the whole big data issues in terms of ingestion and all that we are rightly facing. Different kinds of challenges that I'm sure I will not go through this because all of you are experts, so you already have seen this well before we did. Some of the translation issues that I already mentioned in terms of subject classification and several others. So with all this, at least one objective we put additionally onto what our basic objective is, to create a kind of metadata extraction toolbox that can be used effectively by us, by our partners, and as well as could be shared in the open domain subsequently. And based on all these, actually Professor Plavon Bhomik and others, they have organized much of this conference based on our view of what all different kinds of, these are the different sectoral areas of research and several identified research problems that we would like to work on. So besides learning from you all, the experts, we would also like to go forward and collaborate in many of these areas wherever there are expertise. These primarily identified sectors are data curation, search and recommendation, user experience, and data analytics, which to our understanding are key areas that NDL needs to grow into. So this is what is our priority: user-centric design, deep research for new age solutions, which we are looking forward to. So we would like to continue to spearhead the NDL movement to learn, share, and grow through this. And with all your cooperation, I'm sure we'll be able to move faster than we have been able to do in the last 3 years. Thank you all very much. This is the portal. Of course, you can Google to see check the portal.
Thank you, Professor Das. So there is a small memento. Please.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, is there any question for Professor Das? Yeah, please. Can you please pass the mic?
Is this working? Yeah. Thank you, Professor Das. Can I ask a question about, it's really going back to the beginning of your presentation.
Right.
And I think I'm trying to understand how, in the end, you're going to, at a national level, achieve buy-in from, I presume, the institutions that you're working with. In other words, at what point do you see this project being successful? How are you measuring success? Is it in terms of uptake? Is it in terms of numbers of courses and so on? I ask because over my career, I've seen in the UK a number of top-level initiatives seeking to achieve the same sort of ends in terms of digital learning. Very few have succeeded, and that's largely because the institutions themselves have not wanted to take part, to adopt these top-level initiatives, and it's how you get around that problem.
True.
I think I'm
answer to
interested in.
this, John, may be a little long, so I'll just give you the glimpse of it. You'd recall that Professor Chakraborty mentioned that this whole set of initiatives, not only National Digital Library of India, is very strongly supported from the highest level in government. So quite a number of these initiatives that he talked about on 9th July of this year, the minister and eventually the president of the country actually talked to heads of 1,000 institutions in a 3-day workshop and explained them why this is required, what needs to be followed up, and they're strongly following up on that. So certainly we would not like to leave hope in terms of that. Unless institutions adopt, this will not happen. And certainly we would like to learn from your experience as to what you analyze as to the reasons of why it didn't work earlier. Of course, there's always a question of timing. People today are more naturally adopting digital techniques. The today's generation feels. I still am in a classroom teaching, but my students are very comfortable actually learning that on the mobile. So things will change. That's what we believe. So, and rest of it we can discuss because there are a lot of related issues that are here.
Sir, we have a question from conference room.
Yes. Could I see you? No. Okay. Please go ahead.
Sir, my name is Indrajit Banerjee. I am from IIT Shippur. My question is that I am very interested with your presentation regarding the research part of I find that there are so many research on metadata and the other data related issues. So my question is how institute like us will and our students will get a chance to get collaboration with your institute so that we can put forward our concepts and ideas.
You are from IIST, right?
Shippur, right, sir.
Yes, Shippur. So it's a no-brainer. Your head of the institution is our faculty.
Right, sir.
Right? He happens to be my undergraduate supervisor. So just drop me a mail and we'll get the ball rolling.
Okay, sir.
We are looking for researchers in this area, so that's not an issue.
We will take just one more question. Due to the shortage of time, we can take one question only now.
So thank you very much. This is Professor Mesbah from Dhaka University, Bangladesh. So actually this is not my question. Sir, you said you felt nervous. You are not nervous, number one. Number two, sir, you mentioned Ranganathan 5 laws. This is the pillar of library science in one sense. So I do appeal to you to correlate these 5 laws effectively more and more with the NDL in future.
Sure,
Thank you.
we regularly do that. I'm not from library science, so unfortunately I learned these laws after I started the NDL, getting involved with the NDL project.
But you are doing lots for us.
Certainly I find that that's a global objective that we will try to get.
Thank you.
Thank you for your suggestions.
Sir, we have another question from conference room.
I am sorry. Due to the shortage of time, we will not be able to take any more questions. So if you have any question, please contact Professor Das during the lunch break. And I hope it is okay for him to answer the questions during lunch break.
Yes, sure.